Welcome back, everybody. And in this video, I'll be talking about sprint planning. I have a system that I've developed to help teams perform their sprint planning, especially Scrum teams that are just starting on their journey and they need a bit more help and guidance and structure around their sprint planning. So this comes from the Scrum Guide, and let me zoom out a bit as what we'll be doing. I'll be stepping through a way that you can do the sprint planning with your team using a capacity based style, not necessarily a velocity based style. Information here if you're new to Scrum processes, the Scrum Guide you can find online at scrumguides.org. It's open source. No licensing needed to use the framework. Just read. It gives you great information on how to execute the sprint planning, but it doesn't necessarily get into the how details, and that's what I'd like to cover in this video. So on a high level, when you do a sprint planning, kind of stepping back to a 101, the first thing we have, and in here in the Scrum Guide, they talk about topic 1, why is this sprint valuable? So when we're using agile processes, we're trying to create an increment of the product, a valuable increment of the product. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have the full and complete product ready to go to market. It might mean that we need to create a piece of that product and to show that it's valuable to our stakeholders. If you're an early stage startup, then you may want to show small increments of value to the people who are funding or to your board of directors, whoever might need to see the progress that you're making so that they can help you along on your direction. Your customers can give you feedback and you understand that you're going down a valuable path and you're providing something that's useful. Then next, what's to be done this sprint? Typically, the product owner has a backlog of items that they need completed. And so the team has to determine, well, how much of this can I pick up in order to execute through the sprint? Now, in this specifically, it talks about understanding, well, how much can we actually do or pick up? And that's a bit on my system here that I'll be showing you. It helps you make that determination. And how will the chosen work get done? There's an element of decomposition. So a lot in Agile practices, what we do is we break things down. We might start with a very large, fluffy, aspirational piece of work, and that needs to be distilled and refined down into a daily plan that the team can execute. And then finally, it's a sprint goal is then determined based on the plan that the team has derived. And then all that gets, as it says here, placed into something called a sprint backlog. And that's fully developed by the team. So for some of you new to Agile practices, this is essentially the team is coming up with the plan. It's no project or program manager or CEO or manager just in general coming in and just saying, thou shalt do, and dictating the work. The team selects that and they create this thing called the sprint backlog, which is essentially their offer to get that increment, that valuable increment of the product completed. So capacity versus velocity-based sprint planning. I want to call this out because it's quite important. There's nuances between the two. So what I have here is just a high-level example of a product backlog with a story point amounts associated with these product backlog items, PBI. Story points are just a way to determine complexity. So something that has a higher story point value relative to the other PBIs that you see here means that that higher value has more complexity in it. So it may take more time as a possibility. It's usually what happens is you have to bust down the complexity. There's an understanding that the higher complexity items will take more effort by the team. And the story points are a team-based estimate on the size and complexity of that work. So an 8 is going to be far more complex to do than the 3 relative to each other. Okay, so that's a topic for another video. But with the velocity-based sprint planning, the idea is, okay, if I have a team that can do essentially maybe 11 points a sprint, 5 and 3 is 8. Like we got another 3 here. Okay, we can just draw the line there. We can pop these 3 off the backlog, put it into the team sprint backlog, and away they go. Next time around, next sprint, there will be an 8. Can't quite take the 5, assuming that these are in order. What if the product owner does agree that we can flip these around? Then perhaps we can take those items, okay, and so on and so forth. Velocity-based sprint planning works well when there are not many factors that change sprint over sprint. You got the same team members. We're not looking at different meetings or stat holidays or any other disruptions that come into play. But if it's quite consistent and the domain expertise that the team's working in doesn't shift a lot, so they're working in the same kind of business area, for example, then what we'll find is that the velocity-based sprint planning can work quite well. But what I find is that things are much more, reality is much more complex than that. There's much more nuances that are in play. So there may be different people taking vacations or different meetings that come into play. Maybe there's a monthly town hall. Different stat holidays may pop up. You have maybe people working in different geographic areas of the world, and they take different holidays or they have different events that are going on. And as much as we try to reduce those from the context of a Scrum Master to make things less complex, we can't eliminate all of the variations that come up. So this is where capacity-based sprint planning comes into play. So here's how it's going to work at a high level. The teams are going to take the product backlog items. I got a couple here as an example. And they're going to pull them from the top of the backlog. Then they're going to work on tasking those product backlog items. And I got a couple methods for them to do that here. To which, when they're done, they can plot the tasks onto this calendar. This is the core of the idea here, is that we'll plot things onto the calendar in order to determine, well, how full are we as far as the ability to take on more work. So the team really does get to show and demonstrate that they can take on only a certain amount of work. And so when I mentioned before about product managers or program managers or executives trying to thrust work onto the team, they have a way to say, no, thank you. Here's our game plan. This is what we're working towards. How does this work? The product owner starts by providing the team with the prioritized backlog of items. So in this particular example, they've provided us with an 8 and a 3 from the top of the backlog. The team takes this information, they can read through the user story, and then the team comes up with their game plan in order to solve this. The best way to do the game plan, there's a couple ways here. One, I'm using the Miro tool, but you can also do this on the whiteboard, is by a general mind map. And the way that we use a mind map is mind maps have nodes. So every time, every node can split into one or many additional nodes. Okay. So what I have the team do, and I found this quite successful because As the teams start writing and sharing their thoughts, and this is the important part of this style of sprint planning, is we want it to be collaborative and having all the team members talking amongst each other. And as they're calling out the things that need to be done, they're actually adding it to this mind map construct. The idea here is this task, and this task are kind of in a serial one after the other mode. So what the team is indicating here is that in order for this QA check to execute, then they need to have these pieces done in that particular order. When we have a branch at the same level, then the team is indicating that that's parallel work that can happen. So I can have one person writing the test to check for that autonomy value, and another one if they need to add something to the database, they're doing that database work, and they can do that at the same time. And later they can determine how they're going to come together and synchronize those items, which can possibly be a task as well. So we have the teams writing out the tasks, and then they get that all set. Another way of doing that is you can just craft sticky notes. So what I also do in person is I ask the team to take sticky notes and Sharpies and just to start to write the plan. One way of potentially doing this is, notice I got 2 user stories here. If my team is a bit on the larger size, then what I can ask is one group goes ahead and they do this adjustment submission. I think I got the wrong one there. Let's take a look here. Adjusting a claims. Yes, that's an adjustment submission, so great. What that means is when they're going to submit an adjustment, then it's going to check it. So perhaps I need to clean up the language a bit, so that can be some feedback to the product owner when we do this. But the team can work in parallel on these 2 items. So think about it, if you're in a physical space, you have one half of the team working on one user story and another half working on another user story. And later what they can do is they can show the work to each other and then do a cross comparison and feedback check right there in the sprint planning. So the team number 2 will come over and check this team's work. So they'll take a look at the tasks that the one half of the team has created, and then ask for feedback, provide clarifying questions, or even add additional tasks that they think are pertinent. And then repeat that for the other half of the team. The idea with this is when we split the team up and have them work in this manner, we can actually optimize the meeting time because we have people working in parallel. When we're done, we can take these tasks, and what I'll do is I'll just drag these down to the board. Okay. And then the team can start to volunteer for these tasks. But what they may want to do before doing that is check capacity. So for example, we can bring up a sticky note here, and this particular individual, John, could be way on vacation. So they can add that to the calendar. And perhaps since there's a Labor Day, there's a Friday, it's on a Monday, then perhaps we have some people that want to take a day off here. So they may go, okay, I'm going to do vacation here and here, bookend the Labor Day. Someone else here might say, okay, well, Thursday, they're going to pop in. They might have a doctor appointment in the afternoon. And then for all of the team members, here's another idea. Okay, so what I added here is a staff meeting. So this Monday morning, there is a staff meeting. I'm just double checking, make sure everything's good on the calendar. It is. Okay, so we know that it's going to be hard to deliver work or work on work during the staff meeting. Perhaps it does take up that amount of time during the day. The reason why I split this into AM and PM, because typically The team starts, you may have daily stand-ups. They get their daily stand-ups done and other meetings and things to get themselves started, get the coffee, get settled in. Then usually what I find, there's 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours, if you're lucky, of heads down work to get done. Then lunchtime comes around, and so the teams may break for lunch because there tends to be, in a physical realm, there tends to be general chatter and movement around lunchtime. The dynamics change. For teams working in the virtual session, they just might determine that, okay, I'm going to take a break so I can, focus might be lost if I'm pushing too hard. But that comes down to your team and the individuals. And then it starts up again in the afternoon. We might have another 90 minutes, good 90 minutes to 2 hours of solid focus time before possibly end of day interruptions start. People start leaving, say, okay, see you later, see you tomorrow. And then some of the small talk might happen. Or even I suggest to teams is have kind of a checkout later on, or at least a check-in with the product owner or other people that are providing feedback. Just say, here's what I have at the end of the day. Just want to check in with you, or it's a good time to collaborate and have some pull requests between the developers later in the day. With that set, then what we do is we start to volunteer for tasks. So write test to check for, so let's say they're doing test-driven development, so they might do that. And then they're working on the database. QA has a call out here, so the QA check for reporting anomalies. Maybe they can't do that at that point. Perhaps it's in Tuesday. Develop UI to capture autonomy value. So I'm just going to place these in. I know I should look at the mind map and see where these should deliver. Okay, I'm just going to put these in just to pop them into some slots here. So the idea is on Tuesday morning, they're going to be delivering the perform security audit on input fields, for example. And perhaps these are one-day tasks. So if they are one-day tasks, we can switch them over to the PM, if that makes more sense. Now, if you want to go as far as expanding and straddling the line, we can do that as well, saying these are one-day tasks. Great. So the idea is John is now full. Let's say it takes these days to complete. All right. Now the team can see when those folk are delivering, so that when it comes to the next one here, and let's just say, for example, okay, so just assume that these are generic tasks that the team has created. So we can take these, bring them back down to the board, and for example, we can put that one to say they're doing the dev tasks. We got our cloud ops doing some provisioning work. Then perhaps they need to wait. And there's another QA task comes in here. Once you do the QA, you can do a cloud deployment because that staff meeting's in the way. Assuming they have the QA task coming in the afternoon. So we'll have to wait to do the cloud deployment. And there might be some additional dev tasks. And we're going to assume that they are one-day tasks here. That's going to deliver on the Thursday morning. So we just have to check in and see if there's any decomposition necessary there. So John might have reasons for that task floating out to Thursday. So what we've done here is now you can see that the team looks like they potentially have the ability to possibly take on one more user story. So if that's the case, the team can go to the backlog and determine, okay, we might have a 5-point PBI. They can take that, they can pull it out, and then start to task that separately. And then plot the items onto the calendar. And then when they say they're full, then they're full. They do a commitment. So Fistify or whatever commitment system that you're using can then be run. and then we negotiate on the sprint goal. So for example, this team wants to just ensure that the claims adjusters now have autonomy levels for at the end of the 2-week cycle. They have autonomy levels that are in play as part of the increment of the product. This is an example of how to do sprint planning, capacity style. You see we're breaking out the tasks as a team, then placing them into this calendar, which overlays the capacity of the team by virtue of them blocking out when they're not available. This allows us to see the plan in action. What the Scrum Master can do here is they can place these tasks into the backlog tool, whether using Jira, Azure DevOps, version 1, whatever tool that you're using. They'll place the task within that tool, so you have your system of record and you have your task board. Now, if you're doing it physically, then I just put the 3M sticky pad easel papers up on the wall, draw out this calendar, and place the tasks into it, and then keep that there. So if the team needs to say, okay, well, where do we have those tasks delivering, they can always look at the calendar. In the Miro board, it's captured, so the team can always come back and look at the task. And if anything changes, so that's a part of your daily stand-up, which I could do a separate video on. If anything changes, then we can negotiate what's happening and bump work around as needed, depending on what particular change. Let's say something came up. If there was some sort of large incident that came into play that disrupts a team, then we can drop that into the board and shift the work accordingly. And if any of the work gets shifted off of the board, then we can have a conversation with the PO and determine that do we need to continue with that, or can we trim that and still maintain our sprint goal. That is a sprint planning. Again, Scrum guides where you can go to get the high level elements, but it doesn't go into the how, and go ahead and use this information to execute the sprint plan. What I'll do is I do have a Patreon running. I'll put the information in the description below. I'll sanitize this board and create a template for it. So for those of you that run Miro, you can download it. I'll create a PDF version as well that you can use as a template for setting up any other collaboration board that you're using, or a physical board for your physical space. Happy sprint planning.